Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are honoring Mr. Thomas A. Johnson, who served with distinction as a resident engineer for Construction Operations Division from 1987 to 2002. He had 15 years of dedicated federal service at the Alaska District. At this time, I please ask that you rise for the national anthem. Please remain standing for the invocation given today by Chaplain Barna, the J. Bear Installation Chaplain.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this Hall of Fame presentation as we honor Mr. Thomas A. Johnson for his federal service here in Alaska, as well as many other places throughout his over 30 years as an engineer. Lord, the standard, his dedication to duty and his hard work are epitomized for all those who follow in his career field. Lord, that's why we are honoring him today. He set an example for others to follow, a memory for those to embrace and love, and a dedication to work that is above none. It is a shame that his wife could not be here. Lord, I thank you for what she did in taking care of him and letting him do what he needed to do in service of others. Let us honor him well today in this ceremony. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. You may be seated. The Alaska District Hall of Fame Award is designated to recognize and commemorate employees who have made significant, long-term transformational changes to the district during their lengthy tenure. This past fall, the Hall of Fame Board met and recommended to the Commander, Colonel Listokey, select Mr. Thomas A. Johnson as our recipient, and today he will officially be inducted into our Hall of Fame. Mr. Johnson served as a resident engineer in the Richardson Resident Office. He was a 1968 Washington State University graduate and a registered professional engineer. He was critical to the early 90s effort to fix Shemya, a $500 million revitalization effort when Elmendorf Air Force Base received a tremendously large influx of MILCON work. It was Tom Johnson who set the tone for exceptional mission accomplishment during this period. His workforce numbered about 65 in the heyday, and he handled well over $100 million annually in project work. So many of these projects are still touted as among the best facilities, the installation that he supported and in the state. Mr. Johnson retired in 2002 from the Alaska District and unfortunately passed away in 2012. He and his wife Elizabeth resided in Vancouver, Washington. He left his mark so very high for others to emulate that we must unfailingly recognize him for his dedication and good-natured leadership and devotion to his nation. Miss Betty Johnson, his wife, was invited to attend today's induction ceremony for her late husband, but unfortunately was unable to make the trip to Alaska. She's extremely elated about Tom's induction into the Alaska District Hall of Fame. We are recording today's ceremony so that she may watch remotely. I'd like to welcome Christopher D. Listoki, our district commander.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me through this? Is that blasting through? All right. Thanks for joining us here today. And it is a pretty special day. You know, organizations are great because of their people. Great organizations are ones that take the time to recognize the contributions of the people that are part of that organization. And that's what we're here to do today. We're lucky we get to work for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You know, at the end of the day, when we look back on our service, we can always point to those things that were accomplished. You know, Rock mentioned some of the projects that Tom worked on. So all of us can point to various buildings, facilities, even in regulatory, aquatic resources protected, environmental cleanup, whatever. We've got a tangible object that we can point to and said, yeah, I did that. So it's easy for us to kind of quantify our contributions. But in my view, the real legacy of a person is the impact that person has on the people that are around them. And in this case, that's very much the case for Tom Johnson. Our most important legacy really is the impact that we have on people. You know, as I look around the room, I see a number of folks here, folks that have gone on to great things in the district. We got, you know, Bill Walters, see Jackie over here, Jackie Fabrizio, Mark Kelleher, you know, Claire Yeager. You know, I was a young captain when I first met Tom. All of us were affected by his leadership, by his counsel, by his expertise. And that extended beyond just that group of people. There's a whole generation of engineers out there that can attribute their success in some way to what Tom represented. Colonel Koenig was a captain that worked for Tom. Colonel Raimhilt was a captain who worked for Tom. Both of them went on to district command. You can reach all the way back to when he worked on the Bonneville project, and he trained a then young Captain Flowers, Bob Flowers, now retired Lieutenant General Bob Flowers. So he's had a tremendous impact on all of us. And I think it's fitting that as I come to the end of my tour here as the commander of the Alaska District, that I get the opportunity to recognize his service and his commitment and the impact he has had on me personally. I arrived here in the late 90s as a young captain, right out of grad school. I was new to Alaska. I was new to the Corps. I was new to construction, quite frankly. And Tom Johnson was my supervisor. And he taught me a lot in those 2 years. In fact, my very first experience with him was he handed me what was then the red book, the safety book, and said, "You got to read this. This is what we're all about. It's not about buildings. It's about making sure that we build something that's safe, that we keep all our workers and all our people safe. This is your most important task." And I took that to heart, and I've carried that through my career. He taught me about quality, you know, how the Corps measures quality on a project. He taught me a lot about communication, all right? You know, those of you who knew me back then, I was a little bit more hot-tempered than I am now. And it's true, yeah. And I remember, I don't know what the incident was, but I was fired up. And he pulled me off and said, "Listen, you know, don't get down in the pig pen with the pigs. You're going to come out with mud all over you." And he was right, all right? So I learned to temper how I engaged with people. When I first joined the district, email was a new thing, and I think he recognized very early on the threat that impact posed to effective communication, and we see that to this day, where people tend to depend on email as, you know, message passed, message received. And he didn't like that. He believed in communication. The most important kind of communication was face-to-face communication. get out of your chair and go visit the person. He believed that if you couldn't do that, then pick up the phone and call them. You know, it was only after you've exhausted those methods would you resort to something like email. And this was early on in the digital age, and he was absolutely right. So he taught me all those things about communication. But he had another side to him, you know. He drove around in his car, and he had a hard hat in his car, and his presence was felt on the project site, on the, you know, whether it was dealing with the contractors or dealing with the customer. If you ask many of them, I think Pat can attest to this, a lot of people thought, well, when you said the Corps of Engineers in Alaska, you meant Tom Johnson, because he was the face of the Corps for many of these organizations. So while he had his hard hat in there, you could always bet that he'd have a set of golf clubs with him as well. And we'd just finished the 2 golf courses over here on the Fort Rich side. So he was an avid golfer. You know, but he had a lot of other interests. How many here knew he was a quilter? I mean, this guy was a tough as nail construction guy, right? Hard like concrete. But he was an avid quilter and cross-stitcher. I remember going out to dinner. My wife, we went out to dinner with Tom and Betty, and they took us to a wine tasting event downtown. I'd never heard of such a thing. I thought wine was something you bought and it was in the brown paper bag, you know, that good stuff, Mad Dog or Night Train. You know, so he introduced us to wines, and it ignited a passion for us that we follow to this day. I mean, that's something that we very much enjoy. So, I mean, he clearly had an impact on me, whether it was safety, whether it was quality, communication, or just balancing work with life. All of those things he taught me in some way, and I've carried that forward in my career. And I think if you asked every one of the officers that I mentioned there, they would share a similar experience. So with that, I will wrap up, and we'll go ahead and move on with the presentation. So thank you.
At this time, we'd ask that Pat Coullahan join us, as he has already done, and for the official presentation of the Hall of Fame certificate, which states: Thomas A. Johnson, 1987 to 2002, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Alaska District, thank you for your dedicated service, building and preserving Alaska future.
Betty, and just some stories I'll have to amplify a little bit. You know, I first met Tom Johnson when we were doing the Fix Shemya program in 1989, and you know, he was quite an impressive character. He had no character flaws as far as I could determine, other than he was obsessed with providing the customer with the best service possible. And the character flaws that he had was he had to work for a couple of colonels over here, and Colonel Cakel and Colonel Pierce, and this program was changed. It was $500 million worth of construction out at Shemya, and it was above the Air Force priorities, priority 0 for the Air Force. And Tom had to recruit a staff to go to Shemya. Mark and Jackie were part of that staff, and a few others in here, and to make that program work. And we had probably the meanest lieutenant general the Air Force could provide for us at the time, Lieutenant General Tom McInerney. And he would come into my office. He was one of the guys that had the key to the back door of my office, could walk right in there. And he had a hotline on my desk, and he would say, what's going on with the supply building out at Shemya or the chapel out at Shemya? And I had to know all that stuff. And, you know, so Tom Johnson was also in my office all the time, getting me up to speed on all of those kind of projects. And I said, well, let me call over there to Colonel Pierce, the commander of the district. He said, I don't care what Colonel Pierce has to say. I want to know what Tom Johnson's doing, because he's the guy that knows what's going on. So just cut out those guys right out of the middle, and Tom was there giving us the information that we needed. I know that he had to be tough on his folks out there, because they were out at Shemya, living in trailers and making things happen for us. That followed on with a huge program here at Elmendorf as well, so he had to inherit all of those kind of aspects. He had the key to my back door and came in a lot when I was the base civil engineer over there. So I got to know Tom pretty well, and I've seen some of his quilting and some of his cross-stitch. and certainly saw him at the golf course every time I was over there. I never knew how he got anything accomplished, you know. He was at the golf course a lot, but he communicated. And he was a generous person with his time. He taught people how to do things, and he listened to what they had to say, and he made sure he followed up. And they were all attributes that I think most of us would like to have in our leaders and our doers in the district. And he certainly was among those. He, you know, if I mention some of the names of the people that, of my cast of characters in the Air Force, I'll get some smirks over there. You know, we talk about Jim Carruth and Bill Hansen and those kind of guys. So, you know, he had to deal with people like that, and he did that well. And I know Jackie knows what I'm talking about, and Mark certainly does. So I'm going to ask Jackie and Mark to come up here for a second and make a statement or two, and then we'll turn it back over. I'll say something in closing on there, unless anybody else has something they want to say about Tom. I know there's things that are you want to say and come true to your heart about Tom, but there you go.
At first, I didn't have any idea of what to say when Pat popped into my office and told me about this, but then a lot of things come back. And before I do the funny story about the bat, I'll talk about exemplify his compassionate side. I remember one time being in his office, and he had found out somebody else that he knew was diagnosed with cancer, and you could just see the pain on his face. And I, didn't know who it was or what it was, but I'd known he'd also recently heard that about an employee thing. But he was always compassionate, despite that rough, scary side that sometimes walking into his office was a little bit intimidating. But he was there, honestly, when I had a dog that I had to put to sleep, he was there. And when I got word from New York State that I'd lost my favorite aunt, he was there. And he was just a wonderful person to care about you. And he really cared about my career. So I'm here kind of because he kept me here, and it's his fault I'm here. And I was motivated to take the EIT and pass the PE exam. And he signed off on all my experience, so it's his fault you got me, good or bad. And those that know him, he had a hate-hate relationship with technology and the computers. He hated his desktop computer,
which actually sat on the floor next to his desk. It was on the floor. Remember that?
Yes. And he also had a bat, very similar to this. This is a torn-apart trophy for softball trophy. That sat next to the keyboard and below the screen of that. Whenever that computer went down, he frequently threatened to kill the blue screen devil with his bat, because that's how he felt about it and anyone associated with high technology. So that's my thoughts. I don't know what Mark has to add to that.
Just to add to the story about the bat, at his retirement, we actually presented him with a monitor that was not a government monitor. If there's any attorneys in here, I saw one earlier. There he is. And we allowed him with a baseball bat to beat the monitor to pieces at his retirement, which he did with great glee. So it was very fitting end to his retirement there, that he was able to get rid of that blue screen devil once and for all. My story with Tom started 22 years, and I think about 15 days ago, because I'm up on my 22-year anniversary with the Corps, I was one of those guys they hired to go out to Shemya. First time I met Tom Johnson, he was this very intimidating old guy, because I was young right out of college. Now I'm the old guy, great. And Tom was, at first, as she mentioned, that hard outer shell, but he was the best mentor. He taught me what empowerment meant, taught me how to treat contractors fairly and with an even hand. You know, that we're not out to make the best deal for the government. We're out there to get what's in the contract, which is what's fair and reasonable. And he saw, as Jackie mentioned, he saw people's futures in them when they didn't even see it. He saw potential in me, he saw potential in Jackie and others, and he helped pull us up to be those folks that we could be through that empowerment. I had no idea coming to the Corps of Engineers that one individual could have such an influence on somebody, but Tom was that person. I think about him quite often. The softer side of Tom, I went to Iraq in 2003 and 4. It was a year after he retired. And he sent me a letter. And he wished me well. It was a very heart-touching letter, which I actually regret to this day I never responded to. I was receiving a lot of them, but I was very proud to know him and proud to have been mentored by him over the years. And I can't say enough, this is a very fitting recognition of his skills with the community, with the construction community, and with folks that are still here with the Corps. With that.
Thanks. Anybody else have anything they want to contribute? You, Tom? Okay, well, let me say a few more words. So, in the 69 years of the district, Tom is the 24th person in the Hall of Fame. Certainly, if you look at that wall, look at the achievements of these people that have been here in the district prior to us, and try to emulate what they do, and certainly what Tom has done over the years. He was a great role model, and I certainly miss him as a friend. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our official ceremony today. We ask that you stay and join us for cake and punch in memory of Tom. Thank you very much.